All right, so now we'll take a look at our connective supporting tissues. We're going to see really on this one, it's really a combination of two main things. Cartilage, of which there's 3 different types, and bone. Bone, we'll take a quick look at it, but in reality, we're going to spend a lot more time on bone tissue when we get into the actual chapter on the skeletal system. We'll delve a lot more into the cell types and the other stuff involved in bone, and a little bit less here today. Cartilage, we're going to see is, in a way, it's a lot like some of the other connective tissues. This is going to have the fibers. We're going to have either cells that are in the process of still laying down the cartilage matrix, so the fibers and the ground substance. These would be chondroblasts here. You can see they're not completely surrounded. They're in a little area here. Once they get in this little, what's called a lacunae on this structure right here, that is when they're actually referred to as chondrocytes. So the ones that are still secreting matrix are chondroblasts. The ones that are enclosed and just maintaining that cartilage are chondrocytes. We'll see when we go to bone, it's actually the similar idea. Those things that are making the bone are osteoblasts, and the ones that are just trapped in the bony matrix are osteocytes. Cartilage is kind of mentioned here. One of the things you don't notice in here is a lot of blood vessels at all. And we have this really kind of rubbery matrix. Because of that, there's not blood vessels in there. There's actually factors that are secreted that keep this cartilage rather avascular. And very much like the tendons and ligaments that were very low in blood flow, cartilage with it being avascular, this is one of those, a lot of times if you damage cartilage, it really does not end up healing particularly well. Meniscus a lot of times won't actually even heal. That's a type of fibrocartilage. It will just kind of be, get where it doesn't hurt as much. They'll trim some of it away sometimes, but a lot of times it won't fully heal at all. So another one of those that you'd rather not injure. A lot of times, as much as it sounds bad, it's better off to break a bone than it is a lot of times to damage cartilage or certain connective tissues. We're going to see that there's 3 main types. You have what is called hyaline cartilage. You can see that's number 1 on here. Number 2 is the elastic cartilage. Probably not surprising to all of you that it's going to be high in elastic fibers. And then finally, the last one, where the fibers are a little bit more prominent and visible, is considered fibrocartilage. So hyaline cartilage gets its name because, again, not the picture I have right here, but on a lot of the images of it, you'll see it looks a lot like stained glass. So hyalos is Greek for glass. So a lot of times you get this light pink or light blue, depending on the stain they used, kind of stained glass look to it here. You're going to have what are these called these isogenous groups of cells. So you get these groups of like 3 to 4 cells together that are kind of grouped there. This does have collagen fibers making up the base of it. Making up the fibers that give it its structure, but the fibers are not particularly visible. You're not going to see visible fibers traveling through this. This one, along with elastic cartilage, are also surrounded by a sheath of irregular connective tissue called a perichondrium. Para means around, chondro, cartilage, so around cartilage, it's a sheath around the cartilage. What we're going to see is this one gives you some structure and some durability, but again, is somewhat flexible, and that's kind of the areas that you see this. One of the things that we'll talk about when we get to osteogenesis, the formation of bone, we'll see that one of the ways bone is formed is actually by having a cartilage skeleton lay out first and then converting it to bone, and that's what we see in the fetus. Your larynx, most of the cartilage that are part of your larynx are this hyaline cartilage. It is actually the connection between your ribs and your sternum. And then also on the end of all your joints, so like your elbow joint, for example, on the end of both the humerus and the ulna, you're going to have this articular cartilage, which again is hyaline cartilage, covering the ends of those bones. So when those bones are sliding past one another, it's nice and smooth, because generally bone rubs on bone. What bone decides to do on that is actually just make more bone, and you get bone spurs. And again, obviously from where we find it, keeps the airway open, provides some flexible structure, provides attachments, and on top of that, it also is going to ease joint movements. Elastic cartilage is the next type of cartilage that we're going to talk about. Much like hyaline cartilage, it has a perichondrium. The big difference here, lots of elastic fibers in there, which is going to give it that more springier, kind of the ability to recoil a lot more. So you see this in areas like the epiglottis, which is kind of like the little trap door cover for your larynx, then your trachea. It's a little piece like this. It gets bent down when you're swallowing, and then it will open back up to let air travel in there. The other one is your ears that can kind of snap back in place along with your eustachian tube. Again, providing a lot of flexible support on this one. It can bounce back though. Again, you can kind of see, looks quite similar, has those isogenous groups. Fibers are a little bit more distinct in this one. The last one is fiber cartilage. This one you end up seeing that is the fibers, as you can see on this image right here, a little bit more obvious on this one. You just have rows of chondrocytes, not those groups anymore. And the other thing, this one does not have a perichondrium. Lots of parallel fibers traveling though. We see this in areas that need good shock absorption, so pubic symphysis, intervertebral disc on your spinal cord, the meniscus of your knee. And the main thing about this one is it's a really good shock absorber, so we see this in those areas of the skeleton where we need that. Also see it sometimes where we get some transitions between cartilage and connective tissue, such as like a tendon-bone junction for that matter. And here's a good example of the 3 different types of cartilage. Again, structure, function, location, those key points that you need to know. The other supporting connective tissue is bone, very similar in a lot of ways, just the matrix now is a little bit more calcified, it's much harder. The cells that are in this we call osteocytes, surrounded by a periosteum, not a perichondrium. We're going to see that there's 2 main types of bone. You have compact bone, which is going to be these cylindrical repeating structures, kind of little concentric rings, looks like a tree trunk. Spongy bone we're going to see is a lot of times also called woven bone, is going to be this kind of, it does actually look like a sponge when you look at it. And then the ends of the bones in the interior of the bone, well, this is where I actually find the bone marrow found within the spongy bone. Again, we'll look at in both of these in a lot more detail when we get to the skeletal system chapter. This is just kind of introducing it. So this shows you compact bone, those are repeating circular structures. Spongy bone, the bone is actually, that's the marrow cavity on these ones. This is all little pieces of bone right here. So on this one, that is all the bone right here, and all that. Again, bone is there for protection, protects a lot of our vital organs. It is storage for a lot of our calcium and phosphorus. We make all of our blood cells in the red bone marrow, as well as this provides the lever system for the muscles to move around. And again, good example showing you the review of the bone right here. The last of our connective tissues, and then we'll do one more little show looking at types of muscle and a little bit about nerve cells. But the last one here is the only fluid connective tissue that we have. Well, technically lymph is considered one too, but this one's a little bit more true connective tissue, is the blood. You are going to have the cells and cell fragments, so your red blood cells, your white blood cells, and your platelets. Erythrocytes are red blood cells, transport gases. The leukocytes are white blood cells, do the immune response. The liquid portion of the blood is the plasma. It actually does have dissolved protein fibers in it. So even this one does have its protein fibers present in it. The main thing this is doing is moving nutrients, waste products, signaling molecules, and many other things like heat around throughout the body. Again, because our cells can't go places, we need to have blood supply to bring stuff to our cells. And this just shows you an example of the blood here. You can see the red blood cells, the white blood cells. These are all little platelets in here. The other one here is considered a fluid connective tissue is lymph. It comes from the blood plasma. We have our capillaries leak a little bit more fluid out than they take back in. This has to get returned to the bloodstream, so it goes this through the lymphatic vessels. It is termed lymph when it is in the lymph vessel. Again, to me, not one of these ones that I really focus on as a type of connective tissue. Also not one I would show you a slide of, because there's really not much to look at, because there's not really cells in it, other than cells that, white blood cells that might be traveling, monitoring what's in the fluids. And again, shows you the blood here. So really the last one here, we'll take a look at the different types of muscle, make a quick introduction to nervous tissue, and then we'll be on to the integumentary system. I'll see you next time.